Hi, my name is Patrick Anderson. I'm a technology specialist with Microsoft Dynamics CRM team, and today I'm going to talk to you about building dialogues with CRM 2011. First, we'll talk about dialogues and what they are. I'll run one and show you how it works, and then I'll show you how to build it and some of the gotchas that you may run into. So first off, dialogues are part of an overall um, object or entity called processes, and processes include workflows as well as dialogues. And workflows are typically an automated process that runs a series of events um, without any user interaction, typically. Now, whereas a dialogue would typically have some user interaction, so you would present someone with forms, with questions that they um, can use to ask as a template, potentially like a call script, where they're gathering data, and then that data can be used in a useful way to populate a record or a form, etc. Now let's run one and show you what it looks like. So I'm going to grab a lead record here. This is a new customer lead, and they have just some basic information filled out here. What I am hoping the customer service representative to do is to further qualify this before we send it on to a salesperson. We'll go ahead and launch this dialog, and I've called it qualify for budget. And as you can see here, it presents a form for us here, and this first one is to ask what the primary reason for this customer that they're looking to purchase. And I'm dynamically adding the customer name here. And then we have an area where I can have a tip. So this is for the person asking the question. There's also a comments field down here, so I could add in some free-form comments that may be useful. But I'll just put in some data here so we can move on. So that was an open text field, by the way. I've put a few different examples in here to show you how that works. And when we get into building it, pay attention to that because they're a little bit different in how we handle them and populate the data back to the form. This is a drop-down box, so purchase time frame. I'll say within 30 days. And last thing I want to capture is who's the decision maker. And is there budget allocated for this? So this is a radio button. So a couple varieties there of field types. And as we get into building that, I'll show you why that's useful. So we'll pull up the record here. You see it populated some of this data now. Reason for purchase, purchase time frame. I could manually override that, and a decision maker. So let's take a look at that dialog and how it's actually built. It's the qualify budget dialog here. And I just want to point out some of the gotchas in case you run into these to make this a little bit easier. So I've deactivated this dialog, and the primary things that are different with the dialog rather than workflow are the concept of page and prompt and response. So those two pieces are kind of unique to dialogues because we present a page and we prompt and respond on that. So let's start out here and we go through this, and we start out with a page, and we're going to capture the reason for purchase. We have a prompt and response dialog here, and if I look at the properties of that, we see here's my prompt text, the question. Company name is populated by this variable. So I basically found that by looking at the lead record and then choosing the attribute of company name. So there's my prompt text. Here's my tip text. This is again just help for the end user. And then the choice of response type. In this case, it was a text. So it's very straightforward. And that's basically it. Now, here's another one where we used a drop-down pick list. And if we look to set properties on that, it's a little bit more complex because we have the pick list variables. So we simply add those, and then we give them a value and a label. That's essentially it. Pretty common there. And this is probably one that kind of got me the first time, and that is the time frame and basically how to update that. So because we're updating that to a form where we also have a drop down of all these values. So you know, we need to step through this carefully and choose how we want that set. So we look at what the value is equal to, and if it's you know, 0 is ASAP, less than 30 days, the value was 1. So we step through kind of an if-then, otherwise it moves on. And what we're doing in each of these is basically setting the purchase time frame from that variable of the specific attribute. So if it's 0, and that was ASAP, as soon as possible, then I look for basically that value in the drop-down of the lead record and assign that specifically. So, and that gives you some nice flexibility because it gives me a drop-down in the question, and it also gives you a drop-down on the end-user record form where they're asking the question. So let me go back to that. So even though, so we'll fill this out initially, but it allows me to go back here and manually change this. So it makes it nice and flexible. But in doing that, you have to be careful with how you're building your dialogue. So you step through, you look for what the initial piece was set to, and then set it specifically based on the attributes of the screen there. So that was probably one of the trickier ones. And then lastly, we had the decision maker that was a text field. That was pretty straightforward. Then the radio buttons here. And again, we use the same if-then loop. This was a yes-no, so it was pretty simple. If it wasn't 0, then it was the other option, which is yes. So that was simple. And if we look at the set properties on that one, we do not have that on the form. Or yes, we do. It's right here. So the budgeted project is yes, and we simply put the value in there. The default value was selected as yes, and that populates it there. So hopefully this was helpful on the overview of dialogues, how they work, and how they're built.